Newsroom. I'm your host Khalid, but today is the 11th of April 2025 and we are going to discuss the U.S. Iran talks that are going to happen in Oman tomorrow. They are of huge significance because of various reasons. The JCPOA for one, the current tensions in the Middle East for another, and the Israel-Iran tensions as well for a third. And there are so many other complexities when it concerns the U.S. Iran or the West or Iran relationship. We have with us two guests. Let me introduce them to you one by one. All right, Nasir Ali Khan Saab, former ambassador, joins us in the studios to discuss more on that. Nasir Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. What are the main sticking points you feel that could arise regarding these Iran-US talks? There are different apprehensions from the US side and from the Iranian side as well. If you could weigh the pros and cons, which side is heavier?
You see, right now, as far as the Iranians are concerned, they have expressed a desire to revive the JCPOA, the agreement that was signed in 2015. As far as the United States are concerned, their main aim is to perhaps prevent conflict in the region, and they want to have at least an interim government agreement in place. So this is the main difference. But then as far as Iran is concerned, their President Pezeshkian has clearly said that we do not want war and are willing to negotiate, are willing to talk. So that is an important thing. The intention is there simply because they have too many sanctions on them. They have too much trouble conducting business with the international community, and as a result, they are more flexible. At the same time, as far as the United States is concerned, in my opinion, it's mainly the pressure from Israel, because Israel perceives Iran to be the only major power left that can pose a danger to its very existence, and therefore have been putting tremendous pressure to get the United States involved in a military adventure within Iran.
But you talk of a military adventure. This is what Trump has more or less alluded to if these talks do not succeed. He gives hints of some kind of military intervention if these talks. Is this also a pressure tactic from the US side in your point of view? And secondly, what are the basic US objectives as far as these talks are concerned? Do you feel they could be achieved, or do you feel there will be a middle ground, or do you feel there will be no conclusion whatsoever?
Well, if there's a sincerity of purpose on both sides, then something at least could be achieved. If nothing else, tensions could be reduced. You could buy more time, and maybe Israel would come to an understanding that, if the Iranians agree to having comprehensive inspections, they agree to stop their nuclear program, then it will make them slightly more comfortable. Having said that, in my assessment, their intentions are to somehow bring Iran to a level where there is absolutely no question of them developing not only nuclear weapons but any kind of sophisticated armament. If you see what happened in Syria, once they had the opportunity, they went in there and they decimated all kinds of military assets in Syria. This is what Israel would ideally like to do.
All right.
But there are other factors, other dynamics. The Gulf states and Saudi Arabia and all are very concerned if there is a war that breaks out here. China and India are very concerned because the price of oil, the energy, the supply of oil will be badly affected. In Europe, where the economies are already stressed, where they no longer get energy from Russia, if there is a war in the Middle East, in the Gulf, then that could be have a serious impact on the European economy, together with all these tariffs and things. So the other thing I want to mention about the success of the talks, unfortunately this time around, it doesn't seem that the European countries have been consulted before.
I mean, this is another thing that I fail to understand. Why have the EU, which have been a pillar or a very important part of the JCPOA and continue to be, have been excluded from these talks? Because aren't these talks more or less centered on Iran's nuclear ambitions?
I wouldn't want to say this, but the feeling I get is that Donald Trump has started to treat Europe with a certain contempt, and this is part of that. And the other thing is, a lot of these policies are not well thought out, and they're not done in consultation. The gentleman who's leading the talks,
Steve
Witkoff, is basically a real estate magnate, and he is a special envoy in this particular case. I'm hoping that he will be assisted by people from the State Department and the National Security Establishment, and they will be well briefed. But if you look at what happened in the case of the tariffs, for instance, basic business leaders were not consulted. The Treasury Department and the Commerce Department knew very little about what was going on. So it was more or less like a one-man show. So the problem is the perception that this is perceived and suddenly put out by a single individual, and everybody else has to comply. So coming back to Europe and their involvement in it, I think that is absolutely vital, because in the agreement that you had in 2013, they were a big help all along. Whenever there was any irritant in the process, it were the Europeans that the Iranians trusted more and went and spoke to. The other thing we need to mention is that, surprisingly, India, which is a strategic ally of the US, has also not been consulted. India actually has several defense pacts with Iran, and India in the past has been getting waivers to be able to buy Iranian oil despite the sanctions. India has helped develop Chabahar port and access to the Central Asian states. So if there is war in Iran, it will affect India very seriously. And I think that if there were, considering them a strategic ally, even they should have been involved in this. Not only that they should have been informed, but they could also play a part. You see?
But the talks are, this is what I understand, the talks are centered around Iran's nuclear plans or nuclear ambitions, and the JCPOA has been a very important part of these nuclear ambitions as well. And when you see that the major states are not included that were part of the JCPOA, then Iran's insistence on indirect talks, that it has said more than once, and the US saying no, the talks are direct between the two parties, are also posing a lot of question marks as to the sincerity as far as the future of these talks is concerned. Then to add to that are the recent US sanctions on Iran's nuclear program. Are they also going to affect the atmosphere of the talks? Iran has warned that it is going to expel United Nations nuclear inspectors if such strategy continues. Will this also factor during these talks?
These are all pressure tactics from both sides. Okay. As far as Iran wanting indirect talks at this stage, first of all, I think they feel insulted by the fact that on the one hand you want to come and talk, but you're already giving threats. On 2 occasions, Donald Trump has given them threats of war and of dire consequences, etc. So it hurts their sentiments, it hurts their pride. But other than that, I have noticed with my experience that very often the Iranians can have negotiations with you at one stage, but they would not be absolutely final. Sometimes you think you've reached an agreement, they will go back, and a few weeks later they might change their stance, and the reason could be that the supreme leader did not approve of it. So there is this question of how much authority you have in making these decisions. But the gentleman who is leading the talks from the Iranian side is not only a very powerful and well-experienced gentleman. His name is Abbas.
He's a foreign minister.
Arakchi. He is the foreign minister, but other than that, he has been a senior diplomat who was involved in the 2015 process as well. So the other thing is, he's also part of a Supreme Council which works on foreign relations and is very close to the supreme leader. So I'm hoping that he will have the authority. But when I say all this, that really comes at a later stage. I am gratified, I am glad that negotiations are going on, and there's no question, there was a stage where a lot of people were speculating that an attack on Iran is imminent. So at least for the time being, I'm very happy, and I'm glad that country like Oman, who have played a similar role in the past, when there was a disagreement between the Qataris and the Saudis, and on several other occasions they proved themselves to be neutral and provided a space in this case. The Russians, the Americans and the Iranians will be in the same room.
This is what has been said, that they will be in the same room. Whether the talks are direct or indirect is another question altogether. What about Israel? What about its stance, its potential involvement? You've talked about it, about how Iran wants to completely decimate, Israel wants to completely decimate Iran, and it has shown this intention more than once through different statements that have emanated over the years, over the decades as well. What is going to be Israel's involvement as far as the outcome of these talks is concerned?
As I mentioned, as far as Israel is concerned, the ideal situation for them is going to be that the United States takes on Iran and causes enough destruction to send their defense capabilities back by several decades. The statement from Donald Trump has clearly stated that Israeli military will be involved. Now, you have to be, if you want to war game this, or if you want to be practical, let me explain that Iran, the sort of strategic depth that it has, the capability of retreating, or the capability of having important assets as far away from the area of attack is concerned, Iran's strategic depth is such that its area is about twice the size of Pakistan. Whereas Israel's area is the size, in fact, smaller than the area of greater Los Angeles. So I'm sure you can see the difference in this. It would be extremely destructive, and the fact that people do not put into the equation some of the best air defense systems that Iran may possess. In fact, a few months ago, when Israeli jets went inside to attack, if you investigate what exactly happened, they faced a lot of resistance. They were not able to go as far as they planned initially, and they just unloaded their missiles as far as they could go, and they went back sending a message to Iran. But you see, the other factor is that China and Russia both consider it very important to defend Iran. So this thing can really escalate. And that part that I mentioned about Iran being able to flood Israel with, missiles, that is something extremely dangerous, because Israel possesses a nuclear weapon, and other U.S. assets in the area also are nuclear armed. So this can escalate very quickly.
Missiles, for example.
It is just an unthinkable kind of situation.
All right. Nasir Sahab, also, what kind of incentives, economic or otherwise, in your point of view, could the U.S. offer Iran to secure a deal? And in your point of view, could those be acceptable to Iran?
First of all, the U.S. will have to offer something in exchange, right? They can't simply say, we would like you to shut down your nuclear program. So clearly, there will be something in exchange, and in all likelihood, it will be the lowering of, reduction of sanctions, maybe releasing some frozen funds in Europe or things like that. So there will be something in return, and Iran is desperate to get some relief, in that. So at the end of the day, the question will be, if you come to an agreement, how far and who can guarantee such an agreement? Because as you saw, in the case of the JCPOA, another president that came along simply by the stroke of a pen walked out of an international deal which involved Russia, China,
and European
Germany,
countries.
yes, United Kingdom, France. You see, so the question there is, how comfortable with will the Iranians feel?
How comfortable will the Iranians feel? This is what I'm going to ask Dr. Setareh Sadeqi, who's a political analyst joining us from Tehran. Dr. Sahiba, thank you very much to have joined us. What is the outcome in your point of view? What is going to happen tomorrow in these talks? There is such a lot of mistrust between the US and Iran on so many issues. What kind of outcomes do you expect from these talks tomorrow?
Thanks for having me. As you said, there is a lot of distress and a lack of trust in the US because it has already withdrawn from an internationally worked on and signed deal between 6 partners, and the US unilaterally withdrew from the deal simply because it was signed by an administration that Trump didn't like. And there is no guarantee that the US would not do the same thing again with anything that comes up, or if the administration changes. And we all know that the US has a history of withdrawing from international treaties or breaching international treaties and violating international law. So there is actually no guarantee that the US, or at this point at least, the US has never offered any guarantee that it would stay true on its promises by virtue of any deal or that it signs. But at the same time, there are talks and there are headlines by various newspapers that Witkoff, who's the U.S. envoy to the Middle East and is supposed to be attending the talk in Oman, has said that if the Iranians do not go for direct talks rather than indirect talks, he's going to delay the trip or not even attend. So it seems like the U.S. is already sending signals or confusing signals as if it really wants to talk to Iranians on an equal level on sincerity. The Iranians have...
You talk about the U.S. reactions that have come. We've also seen the reactions that have come from Donald Trump, and he says if these talks do not succeed, then Iran is going to be in a lot of trouble, and he has said more or less variations of that. But this is, I feel, is a threat. What mechanisms in this situation where there is a lot of pressure being put on Iran by the US to comply with the talks and to agree to the preconditions or the conditions that will be put on the table tomorrow, what mechanisms could ensure compliance with any agreement if it is reached in Oman, given this mistrust between both sides?
It's on the US to prove it to Iranians and the world that it will stay true to its promises. And there should be a mechanism within the US administration, US House and Congress that would guarantee that a unilateral withdrawal from an international deal cannot happen only through the individual as running the administration as the president. So if one president decides that, okay, I don't want this deal, he cannot just unilaterally withdraw from it and bring about all the consequences and aftermath and impose it on other nations, including the European partners. So if there was, I would say, if there was a procedure that is within the U.S. administration that would guarantee that the U.S. administration would have to comply with an international deal that it signed, then you would say that, well, we can trust the U.S. But we don't have that. And not only we don't have that, but also we have seen in several times that the U.S. has breached international laws. So it's kind of like gambling on something that you can never actually guarantee. But if the U.S. decides to change the attitude that it has always had towards other nations, especially Iran, ever since the Islamic Revolution happened inside Iran, as long as they stay with the same tactics and attitudes towards Iran, I don't think any deal will happen, or if it happens, we'll witness the same thing that happened with the JCPOA, which is a unilateral withdrawal and then the European countries just complying with what the U.S. says, because that's, like the U.S. Is the boss, and the European countries don't even seem to have any willpower to stand against the U.S., even if their national
Even in
interests
this
are
case, the
important.
European states have no say whatsoever, because they have not even been consulted as far as these negotiations between both the sides is concerned. Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Setareh Sadeqi, political analyst, joining us from Tehran. Thank you for your time as well, Nasir Ali Khan Sahab, former ambassador at large, to have discussed this very, very important issue and these negotiations that are going to begin tomorrow. All fingers crossed. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back. Our second segment concerns Afghanistan, where the Foreign Office spokesperson has said that Afghanistan and terrorism in the country remain a major impediment to improving bilateral relations with our neighborhood country amid all of the concerns over militant sanctuaries across the border in Afghanistan. We have talked about this time and again. We continue to talk about this because it continues to be a threat, and the Afghan interim government refuses to understand Pakistan's perspective. We've been joined by Brigadier Masud Ahmed Khan Sahab. He's a senior analyst in the studios. Thank you very much, sir, to have joined us. Pakistan, through its Foreign Office spokesperson, again reminded Afghanistan that terrorism remains a major impediment as far as bilateral relations between the two countries is concerned. How do you view a statement that reiterates the same perspective that Pakistan has had since the last few months? Why isn't Afghanistan reacting the way it needs to?
Time and again we are conveying our concern to Afghanistan, even through diplomatic channels, and last time Ambassador Sadiq was in Afghanistan and he conveyed his concern to the Afghan officials. And he also provided the evidence of the Bannu attack, where Afghan nationals were part of that attack, and subsequently the Jafar Express attack, which was being controlled from Nimroz, Afghanistan province next to the western border, close to the Balochistan. So, but we cannot move ahead of while not addressing the security situation, the terrorism which is emanating from Afghanistan. So, we cannot address and go and talk about trade and other activities. So, that is our basic concern. Unless you address the security concerns of Pakistan, which has been conveyed time and time again, not by only Pakistan, by the regional countries, United Nations Sanction Monitoring Team, and recently the Americans, they have also shown their concern. Unless the Afghan interim government address these concerns of Pakistan, we cannot move ahead. Very simple.
You spoke of Mr. Sadiq's visit for the JCC between the two countries. Afghan Commerce Minister Nuruddin Azizi was expected to visit Islamabad after Eid. That did not happen. Speaking at a recent seminar that was hosted by think tank Ambassador Sadiq also warned that all deals with Afghanistan were off if the Taliban authorities failed to address Islamabad's mounting concerns about terrorism emanating from the Afghan territory. Seeing that there is no reaction to date from the Afghan side, what should we expect as far as the outcome of the JCC is concerned?
JCC is basically a forum to talk about the economic and trade cooperation between the two countries. But as I was saying in the first question, that is linked with the security. If the security concern of Pakistan is not addressed, then how we are going to talk about the trade and other activities, like the Torkham border, which was closed for a month or so, but that has been opened. Now the traffic and the Afghan transit trade activity is on. But our concerns are still there, and we have serious concerns as far as the Fitnal, Kharij and Baraz, they are operating from Afghanistan. So we don't, unless their sanctuaries are dismantled, steps are taken, and they should be shown to us that they have taken some real steps. But unfortunately, we haven't seen in the last almost 4 years any concrete steps by the Afghan Taliban government inside Afghanistan. But hopefully with the recent gestures and the from United States, where they have shown their concern about the Afghan Taliban. J.D. Vance, while speaking at a forum, he said they are the worst, the Afghan Taliban, the worst terrorist organization. So similarly, President Trump has suspended that humanitarian, so-called humanitarian aid which was flowing in Afghanistan. Then they have also shown their concern as far as the weapons are concerned.
The billions of weapons that
billions
are
of weapons. And he said $80 billion military assets were lost inside Afghanistan. So there is a serious concern. But at the same time, they have thanked the President Trump, thanked Pakistan, so mean as a good gesture. So we are expecting a cooperation in near future from United States.
We are also expecting a counter-terrorism dialogue in June this year as well.
Exactly.
Brigadier Sahab, I'd like to also, you talked about the Fitna al-Kharij or the TTP. The country's intelligence agency has recently foiled a major terror plot as far as a deadly attack on a strategically important airbase in Karachi is concerned. All that has roots to the Fitna al-Kharij or the TTP. And this was a plan that had been going on for a lot of months, and our intelligence agency were able to nab it in the bud before it could actually happen. And those who were behind this incident that could happen and did not happen were also behind other similar incidents that have happened in Pakistan in the past as well. For example, another attack that happened a couple of months back on Karachi also, and then the perpetrator had fled to Afghanistan and then he was back here. What should be the methodology of securing or strengthening Pakistan's security paradigm in the wake of such attacks?
So we have already made a clear, a strategy has been adopted, and a clear-cut message has been given to the Afghan authorities. The Chief of Army Staff is very categoric when he says of the Afghan policy, and this time we have conveyed, we have talked of the hot state. The concept of hot state is now in Pakistan. So there will be no status quo issues. We are not going to accept any status quo issue. There will be no appeasement, no apologies, no avoiding things. If anything happens, if something is the rules of engagement, now we have made it very clear that from where the terror originates, so we will go after that particular point. So that has been conveyed by Ambassador Sadiq when he visited in March to Afghan officials. So we are now clear that we will go after those hideouts, the sanctuaries from where its planning is being done. So we've already conveyed, like as I was telling you about the Jafar Express, that was being controlled from Nimroz province. And similarly, other attacks in the past, we have seen the similar attacks like the APS attack of 2015, where there was an Indian Angora Apache who was sitting in Jalalabad, and he was in touch with and he was communicating with the terrorists who were killing those kids inside APS.
In December 2014.
December 2014, sorry. Similarly, there was an attack against carried out against Siraj Rehsani, one of the election rallies, where about almost 400 they were martyred. So there was one Indian raw official, Patnaik, was sitting at Spinball, and he was controlling that terrorist attack. So we have given the evidence of Indian involvement. So we understand they are using the Afghan soil. So Afghan interim government, they are basically they have shown their inability, or they are incompetent, or they are not willing to take any action against these terrorists.
Or maybe there's some kind of collaboration or cooperation between these hostile agencies and the Afghan interim government. How should Pakistan tackle RAW and other such hostile intelligence agencies that have been whose role has been unearthed, whether it be in the recent airbase incident in Karachi that did not happen, or other incidents in the past, including the Jafar Express incident, because they are not only working indirectly to destabilize Pakistan, but are also providing financial support and equipment to the terrorist elements that are present within the Afghan interim territories. How should Pakistan move forward in your point of view?
Pakistan has already provided ample evidence to international community by submitting 5 dossiers. First was submitted in 2019, and last was in 2020. So we have given even the names specifically of the individual, as I give the name of 2 individuals. There are 4, and we requested the United Nations Security Council to declare them as a terrorist under the United Nations Article 1267, which was the resolution which was passed, but that did not happen. But unfortunately, no, India is already exposed by involving themselves in the transnational repression. There is a case already which has commenced recently, the trial in the United States, where a plot was filed when they were planning to assassinate Pannu, the Secretary General for Six for Justice. So India has been exposed, and recently they are using the EU lab extra assassinating Kashmiris inside Pakistan. So we have now an opportunity to deposit another dossier by giving evidence of Indian involvement.
All right. Brigadier Sahab, the establishment of NIFTAG, the National Intelligence Fusion and Threat Assessment Center, under the auspices of NAFTA, and then the National Prevention of Violent Extremism Policy, both have recently been introduced by Pakistan. How important are they in order to not only assess future terrorist threats that could emanate, but also to tackle them efficiently?
This is very important as far as NECTA is concerned. Unfortunately, they haven't delivered as expected from them in the last so many years. But by creating this new organization, so efforts, as I read, the efforts will be made to ensure the implementation of those points of National Action Plan in letter and spirit. At the same time, they will basically gather on information or collect the information intelligence, and subsequently they will carry out the threat assessment. So that is very important as expected. The second is as far as this curriculum is concerned, a policy which has been adopted. Probably the government has planned to address the root causes of this violent extremism, and they will ensure the human rights at the same time to be addressed, and then ensuring the social harmony among various sects within the country and the religious groups. So from that point of view, the steps are welcome, but one thing is this must be implemented in letter and spirit.
When you talk of counter-terrorism measures, Brigadier Sahab, do you feel that other countries in the region or the U.S., because of the dialogue that is going to happen in June, maybe that could lead to some kind of efforts, joint efforts between both the countries? But is there a need for joint efforts of regional countries to neutralize and stabilize the region?
So that is very important. Recently, probably last month, it was on 18th March, the United Nations, the intelligence agencies, there were 18 intelligence agencies, they issued the National Threat Assessment, in which they declare fitna al-Kharij a potential threat, future potential threat for the world peace. So they have recognized what Pakistan was saying for the last 4 years, that TTP, the fitna al-Kharij, is not specifically Pakistan. They are threatening the region, the Central Asian republics, and ultimately we also then said it will be a threat to the world peace. So now the Americans, they have acknowledged this. So they have shown their concern, as I was telling you, the statement of J.D. Vance, Secretary of Defense, Saeed, followed by National Security Advisor Michael Waltz. And recently there are reports, rumors of taking over of Bagram, and
yes,
their fingers are crossed. And
some of the media outlets are saying
yes,
that they have seen
a new great game.
A new great game.
Yeah.
And if the U.S. does involve itself in an area such as the Bagram base, maybe the situation could be neutralized. Certainly, because of pressure tactics by the U.S. on Afghanistan. The Parliamentary Committee on National Security meeting was attended on the 18th of last month, in which many important decisions were taken regarding Pakistan's security apparatus and security paradigm. They talked about a strategic and unified political resolve, full might of the state to eliminate terrorism from the country, talked about the terror network, logistical support systems, and nexus between terrorism and crime. How important is it to have a unified strategy when it comes to all sections of the society?
So that was very important, and probably unfortunately we did not give that message one political party did not attend that parliamentary, the National Security Committee, which presented give a briefing on the national security issues. So that was unfortunately, that party should have attended that, and
in the larger national
in
interest.
the larger irrespective of your political differences. But however, the message, the resolve has been given by the government of Pakistan, the security forces, the Pakistan army, that they will go after the terrorists across Pakistan, wherever they are, even those operating from across the borders with the Pakistan armed forces, they will go after them in a hard pursuit. There will be no compromise. As I said, there is no, Pakistan will act as a hard state in right.
That is what has been said. And of course, this Pakistan is going to act as a hard state. The Chief of the Army Staff has said the fight against terrorism is a war for the survival of the nation and the future generations. Thank you very much, Brigadier Masud Ahmed Khan Sahab, to have joined us. This is the last show of the week. We'll see you inshallah on Monday with news stories segments that pertain to us, you in Pakistan. Stay safe. Have a great weekend. Allah Hafiz.